Welcome to Wing Talk. I'm your host, Steve Schlesinger. Today is an exciting day for us. We've been working very hard this week. And before we get into it, first of all, you probably never heard of me before. And you probably never heard of our other co-hosts, but you certainly know our guests. So I'd like to take a moment to explain who we are. We are part of the INAV Fixed Wing Group, and we do some absolutely exciting things, which we'll be discussing a little bit later on. But first, I would like to introduce Mr. Mark Hoffman, coming to you live from Germany. Mark, how are you doing today?
Yeah, hi, I'm doing well, and I'm looking forward to a fantastic show today.
Okay, fantastic. Beautiful. And also, coming to us live from just outside of London is Mr. Darren Lyons. Darren, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good myself. Yeah, looking forward to another great chat with you guys.
Okay. Well, our group is basically, just to let you know, what we do is we take these little things, and I'll hold one up right here. Hopefully you can see it. This is a flight controller. Yeah, it looks like you can see it. This is a cheap flight controller. This one only costs around $15. And we put these inside of planes. So it's the same kind of technology you put in drones, but we put them in fixed wing planes. And we have a group that basically supports the firmware for this, which runs these things, known as INAV. We're part of the INAV Fixed Wing Group. And what we do is we're a support group as far as being able to answer questions, and also we're a community. So what we're trying to do is help each other out and really communicate the passion. And these podcasts are really about getting to know the people in the group and highlighting people in the group and kind of just people that we thought were pretty cool. And we just want to have chats with them. But last week, Darren, we were talking in the podcast, and Darren and I and Mark came across this video that has gone viral, and we started talking about it at the very end of the podcast, and we're like, man, this guy is absolutely amazing. This is a guy who, I'm sure everyone has seen this video by now, has made this video about doing FPV back in the 1980s. And it was one of those things that we see videos all the time. I'll give you like 2 minutes if you post a video. Mostly there are planes flying. So I turned it on, and it was an hour long, and I'm like, yeah, right, I'm gonna sit here for an hour and watch it. And like 40 minutes later, I'm like, screw it, oh my God, this thing is amazing. I love this guy. What the hell is he doing? And you're like, no, you can't do that. No, seriously. So the guy was absolutely brilliant. He made beautiful planes. He was at least 20 years ahead of his time, and we are been so excited to meet him and actually to get to know him this week. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Larry Metchke, coming to us live from Houston, Texas.
Hello, everybody. I'm super glad to be here.
Fabulous. So Larry, this kind of all is taking you by surprise how your video's gone viral.
Yeah, absolutely. I was hoping maybe to get 300 or 400 viewers in a few months. It's over 47,000 now, the last time I checked. Jeez. So I'm real surprised by it, and very pleased that a lot of people were able to relate with it.
Yeah, that was, it was kind of, the timing was really great. When I first communicated you, I was talking to you about the idea that right after Christmas, we got this not so nice Christmas present from the FAA here in the United States with a whole bunch of different rules. And we had to, in the first 2 months of the year, we had 60 days to figure out what these new rules were and respond back to them in writing to the FAA. So most of the videos that we saw in that time period were about, NPRM, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and how to respond to it. And then what was happening is where people were supposed to talk about the passion that they had for remote control, flying, which is not only just planes, but also quads, multi-rotors. And so there were some videos that went around where people explained their, neat things, like they had videos of people who were building actual airplanes in their garages, and these are all kind of shoot-offs of radio-controlled flights. So, but I think what happened was we started thinking about our personal history, and then we started thinking like maybe I don't know, if you step back, ask the question, ask yourself is, when did this all start, and how did it start, and who started it? and all of a sudden your video pops up. And for just a moment, we forgot about the problems. And it's kind of like when you date somebody and you go through a hard time and you like take a weekend off and you're cleaning out your, closet. And then all of a sudden you found like concert tickets to like, oh my gosh, that was our first or second date. And those were the good times. We were falling in love. And that's what it was. It was like falling in love with the hobby. And that's what you really got across.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad to hear it came across like that, because that's just really what I wanted to convey.
Fantastic. So we got some questions for you. I'm going to have Darren ask you a few.
Yeah, so Larry, most of our viewers would have hopefully seen your video. If not, they need to watch it after this. But I think what would be quite interesting to hear first is how you got started. Maybe how you got started in aviation to begin with. Was it something interesting at school that got you interested? Or?
Well, I did model rockets when I was in high school, and I was started reading about the Wright brothers. I loved the history around that time of flight, and so around that time I built a sailplane. So that was my first experience with actually building up a balsa model. But then I got into music after that, and it was 20 years later that I got back into building planes, but this time it was with a radio control, because radio control was just starting to come into its own now, getting smaller back then. So after building a few models, designing my own even, we fell into the video camera planes. But, right out of high school, it was pretty much a jump right into music.
Cool. So we'll definitely go back to the bottle rockets later. But with regard to the music, what were you into at the time, and how did you progress that?
Oh, well, most bands play copy music. They copy other the hits of the time. And that's pretty much what I did for a long time, but it kind of worked its way into hard rock, from just top 40 into hard rock in the late 70s. But after doing that for a while and touring, clubs around the whole region, Texas and Louisiana and Oklahoma and all that, I really wanted to do original music. And so about 1980 or so, 81, I produced a demo tape, and that's the music that you hear on the video. I
was also introductory music too. We started the show off with your song, so thank you very much for that. Okay. It's a rocking tune. We've been looking for something rocking like that.
All right, yeah, cool. But when I did my original music, we were able to open for some touring acts. And it was a real good experience getting in front of an audience that really was ready to hear original music, So it was real fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I know what that's like. It's brilliant feeling.
Yeah.
Darren also was a musician too. So tell us about your just a little side note. What was the last gig you played, Darren?
My last gig was a festival where the headliner for the day we played was Alice Cooper. So as Larry said, it's great getting up in front of an audience and having people hear your original material and really enjoying it. That's the best thing ever, to be honest.
Hello, really. Houston, are you ready to rock? Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned you started getting into the RC when the transmitter side started getting smaller, and so the sloping side was more just free flight, was it at your school level? When you said your first balsa was a soaring plane, was that more free flight? And then
that was just a free flight, no control, no radio control at all on that one. But back then, that was 1972 or so. And the servos might have been this big.
Jeez.
So, and so they shrunk down, and 10 or 15 years later, I tried it out.
Oh, awesome. Right. And then you mentioned towards the end about starting to get into the video camera planes. I was just wondering, at the time, I'm guessing you only really had people in your local clubs and maybe flight magazines or RC magazines at the time that shared ideas. We didn't have stuff like the internet. So did
Right.
you hear anything about any other people trying the camera stuff, or did you and your friends just think, just give this a go, it sounds cool?
No, absolutely nobody else that I knew of was doing that. But it was only a couple of years later after I started doing it that some videos came out for sale that had one person from New Zealand, and I learned about a guy in North Texas and one guy in California, Alan Cocconi, did some stuff, but I actually talked to them, and I couldn't really gain much that was much use that I could actually use. I don't know if they were using different transmitters or what, but yeah, they did some good stuff on their own too.
So one of the questions I think that people are going to want to know about was, because they can see if you watch your story how intelligent you are, and they want to probably know how you did in high school. You're a good student at the time.
Oh, well, I was a B student. I was getting by pretty well.
Okay.
But, well, when I started college right after that, when thinking I might go into aeronautical engineering, and took calculus and English. And for some reason, it just didn't click for me at the time. And I think the teachers did me a favor by passing me with a C, if that tells you, if it gives you an indication. So, but many years later, when I clicked with electronics, and went back to school, it just was nothing. It really clicked for me too. So. And
that's kind of a really important story, which is, it's a lot of times you're kind of out of school after age 18. You kind of they kind of push you out of high school and they say good luck to you in the future. And sometimes you go to college or you start some course and then it doesn't quite work out for you. And for you, I guess the story was that you decided, well, here's music as a career. Let me try this out.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right. And so, but then I think the other thing that I really want to emphasize is that when we talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, as something that's important in school, it turns into, well, we talk about this as the hobby as well. This is a STEM hobby. And you look at the people who were protesting the FAA a couple weeks ago, and the average age was 35. So you're talking about a STEM hobby, but you're talking about guys who are, in the mid 30s, 40s, 50s, and even older. But the point I'm making is that it's never too late, because what your story is that you went from aviation to rock and roll. Then you saw something in aviation with flying RC planes that brought you to what your real passion was in life, which is electronics.
Yeah, exactly right.
So it's never, even though it's a STEM hobby, even though we're adults, it's still something that can lead to something else. And so there's a lot of benefits when you do a STEM hobby.
Yeah, but I wish I'd have had the chance to there's something about electronics back then. It just wasn't something I could grasp, and then suddenly later on, I wish I had that in high school, where I had something that could say, well, it doesn't take much. You can do this part and you can do that part and work them together to make a bigger, just little building blocks to make something bigger. And I kind of wish I'd had that in high school.
Fabulous.
Right. That's cool. But one thing I'd like to add is you mentioned the STEM and bringing adults back into education, which is awesome, but also that the 35-year-old average, there's nothing to say those guys haven't got kids who they'll take flying, they'll get into electronics at a young age. So there may have only been 35-year-old average age there, but there's nothing to say that at home there's not kids that are just as eager in the hobby, which is the future of it all. So right, so in the video we see you trying out lots of different things, and I was just wondering, as a broad stroke, what was the most frustrating and what was the most helpful problems that you solved during the process?
Frustrating was trying to get transmitters and receivers to work right next to each other. That was the biggest, longest running problem I had. So I had to, it was the video getting into the radio control or my transmitter back on the ground getting into the VCR, it just a lot of stuff like that. It was a long process. I would reduce the power of the transmitter, of the TV transmitter, so it wouldn't hurt the RC so bad. And then you get worse range, but maybe you can make it up with a big an antenna to receive it on the ground and just stuff like that. The most, the biggest, what did you call it?
Probably the
rewarding?
most, maybe the most rewarding, or the thing that maybe gave you the biggest boost. So once you solved this problem, everything else was made a lot easier, possibly.
Well, it's really more, not any specific one, but it's when they all came together and allowed me to just sit back and cruise around for a mile and a half in 360-degree circle with a mile and a half radius and just cruise around the area, when I didn't have to worry about pointing antennas and losing the RC reception, and didn't worry about, and the video was coming in good. That was one of the best times I had, and I noted it in my notebook that this was how I really wanted it to be like. So that was the most rewarding.
We call that relaxed FPV these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a great feeling. Right, there's one other thing I'd like to bring up before handing over to Steve, and that's the issue. Well, it's not so much an issue, but the reality of costs back then. I mean, these days we'll worry about throwing a plane up that's maybe cost $300 and worry about not getting it back.
Yes.
A lot of the stuff that you had was on loan and brand new technology. I think you'd probably put us to shame with the amount of faith that you had, or that it would work, I guess.
Yeah, that was a leap of faith there, putting that stuff up there. Just the camera alone, my brother-in-law loaned me. It was $800 to him, and that's $1,800 today. I think that was his cost. And it was just the first CCD cameras that had just come out, and they were for security, so they were pretty heavy. And I needed lots of room. That's why I made the big cargo bay in my first plane. But the transmitter, I mean, the TV transmitter at first was a real small thing that my boss loaned me to use, and it was only a few tens of dollars, I guess 60, 70 bucks. And so that wasn't quite so risky with that part of it. But it took some money to buy the balsa and the covering and the engine, and the radio I probably already had, so nothing new there.
Perfect. So yeah, speaking of the planes you build are absolutely brilliant. The thing is that these were your own designs. It's one thing to buy a kit, and there are plenty of kits for sale at the time, but you built these things yourself. Yeah. And one of them is behind you right now, the one I absolutely love. Mark, do you have a picture of them on the cover? The Vendetta.
Yeah.
That is.
I put it on the screen right now.
Okay, and it's up on the screen. Fantastic. So yeah, you were an RC Modeler magazine on the cover with this particular plane. This is a interesting plane. This is very similar to planes we fly today. This reminds me of the HD Wing by Sonic Models. Tell us about that plane.
Well, I don't know. There was something about a flying wing that struck me, and I didn't see anything out there at the time. So I flew a prototype, and it turns out that I was given bad advice on where to put the center of gravity on there, and the thing just would not fly. It would take off and flip over, and I finally and I kept repairing it and all that, and flying again. Finally, I said, man, let me just put the center of gravity up about a couple of inches, and I'll be darned if that thing took off. And I just flew around with it. It was smooth as could be. And so this plane up here is actually the second model. I have never crashed it, so and it had more. This one has more swept back wings, and I got a little bit of washout on the tips where the wing is a little bit curved. They call that washout, and it flies real good. I can go into the wind, fly into a breeze, and just hold it up in the air. And people were saying, "Hey, Larry, you ever going to bring that thing down?" I just let it just gently, just float in the air. And but so it was a real joy to fly.
Fantastic. That is, I think today the wings are like one of the more popular things that we have, especially in our INAV fixed wing group.
Right.
It is there's a lot of great wings for sale, and about 80% of the planes, maybe 90% of the planes that I personally own are wings. You never get tired of these things.
Yeah.
And you were ahead of your time with this, and I really wanted to highlight that, even though it was brought up for only a second in the video. It's just because it was so ahead of its time. It's a pusher prop. You had to think of, because there's no one else, and this is a recurring theme, which is you had to think of these things and think of all the problems and all the solutions by yourself. And that's part of your brilliance, is that taking a problem and going head on into it until you get a solution. And so I'm really glad you still have that plane. It caught my attention when I saw the video.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you moved into, after that, when you got into video planes, you got into planes. Actually, Mark has a question. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from /7FPV. Exhaust on the plane goes forward. Doesn't that make problems? So he's a bit worried that the exhaust of the plane, of the engine, goes forward into the flight direction, and he asks if that makes any problems. That
we're missing a word. Exhaust.
The exhaust. Yeah.
Goes forward. Okay, so no, it goes back. When the motor's in the back, isn't it?
Oh, well, yeah, it's turned around, so the muffler is actually pointing into the wind, yeah. But it has a pusher propeller, and just because the muffler is pointing in the wind really doesn't have any effect. There was that discussion back around that time about that, and it's been done before. So, but no, pushing to where the engine's going backwards, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It's the bearings are fine. There's really no problem with it.
Okay,
and
great.
Then you brought up also flying fields, or at least kind of flying with other people and people watching you, and your experiences going to your local flying field, usually club field. What was your experience like for that?
When I was learning RC, everybody was real helpful, but then when I did the video plane and dragging out all this extra equipment out in, that they were just they allowed me to do it, and of course I don't have to ask anybody any help because I'm the only one around there who knows anything about it. So I can't expect them to come over and help me out or whatever, but
yeah, you're kind of, when you start doing this stuff, you're kind of on your own, right? It was just kind of like, yeah, it's just like, well, that's the thing that's kind of neat, was like I had a neighbor at around the same time who would tell me, go, Steve, I'm going to make a radio controlled airplane, and I'm going to put a camera in the front of it, and I'm going to fly around the neighborhood, and I'm going to sit there and control it and watch it from my TV in my house. But he was drunk all the time. So you did this while you're sober, so which is like one of the things that was really cool about that. But then also the thing that you did was you're one of the first to say, you found a spot on your own, which was outside of the city. You were telling me it was a road that was supposed to be used for something that never got used?
Yeah, it was going to be an, what do they call it, office park. What do you call it? A business park.
Business
park. But it fell through many, probably about 10 years before we started using it. It fell through. So all it is a concrete street with no curbs, and nice. The grass comes right up to the concrete. So when it's mowed, it's just a big smooth area. And there were other helicopter and RC flyers that would come out there too. They kind of adopted it as their ad hoc little field, but I adopted it too myself. And
yeah,
it was perfect for just wide open areas.
And that's kind of the thing. You were like also the first as far as that, or among the first, where people said, I like the club fields, but I don't like going there and hanging out I mean, some people absolutely love the club fields. They like going there and socializing, and they spend, all afternoon there, and they fly twice for 10 minutes each time. But then they spend 5 or 6 hours just BSing with the guys. But there's, the people, FPV pilots are more like, let's go someplace, let's get the planes out, let's get flying, and let's go home.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to be restricted to a club field. I want to go to different places. And that was something you showed in your videos. It's like, here's Scobie Field. Here's, there's some other fields all in the area that you were flying at. You're flying at, and at the very end, you showed, here's all the places, which was also really neat, in Houston before it was all built up. And here's what it looks like now.
Yeah. But mostly when I visited other clubs, it was for a special occasion, like a Labor Day weekend or some fun fly or something like that. So, they were real welcoming for me to come in there and allow me to do my stuff.
Okay, we got a couple more questions here, Mark. Go ahead.
Yep. Lex FPV is asking, do you still fly FPV, and have you ever tried flying a quadcopter?
No and no. I've after going to school, college for 10 years, getting my engineering degree, and then working as an electrician, I've really let it lapse, and I'm okay with that. But I've never done a quadcopter. Never done one of those. I've been invited. I've got people around Houston here who have invited me to come by and try on their goggles whenever I feel like it. And I will probably take them up on that, because I'm anxious to see what it's like to fly with the goggles.
It is absolutely addicting. You are going to love it. And it's, it's just one of those things. Once you get into it and once you feel it, it's just like there's nothing else. Yeah. You have that paper that you were showing us yesterday with the Sky Spy?
The advertisement?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Hold it up right there. Look at this. So look at that. What does this look like? Look at it. That is the Sky Hunter. In fact, I think I got one right here. Let's see. So I got the small version of the Sky Hunter right back here.
We can't see the picture right now because if Steve is talking, then Skype is switching back to you and not to Larry.
Yeah. So Larry, say something as you hold it up.
Oh, you couldn't see my advertisement?
Yeah, now we see it. Now we see it.
Okay, good. Yeah.
This was an ad that I put out. It just sold the plans to anybody who might want to try it. It even says
there's no reason not to try the RC Airborne ATV.
Yeah. Hopefully somebody would, try to do it. And actually, this morning, I finally got somebody messaged me who said he actually saw my article, and he started to take it up, and he did some of the same stuff I did and ran into the same problems, and just
that's cool.
It was just You're
the innovator. That's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, you were. What it was interesting is that these kind of planes, at least the size that you built them at, they're not really great for like park flyers. I'm talking RC parks, because they're just they're the kind of utility. They're long and they're just designed for going straight for long distances, then turning around and coming back.
Right.
Yeah. And so what you had was really ahead of its time. That was your first video plane, right?
Right.
Right. And so I wanted to show Mark, you have that photo of the three guys together? The three amigos, is it up yet?
Yeah, give me a second. Here we go.
Okay. So these are your buddies right here, right?
I can't see the picture, but I know the
This
one
is
you're
a picture
talking
of
about.
you and your brother-in-law
Right.
and
Yeah.
yeah, your boss at the music store.
I think my brother-in-law is on the left. On the left, I think.
Yeah.
And my boss is on the right.
Yeah, your boss had like blondish hair, as I recall. Your boss.
Uh,
You can't remember. It's been so long.
I didn't think they either had long hair.
Blonde hair.
Oh, blonde hair, yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's your boss. Okay, yeah, so these were guys who were instrumental in getting started because what happened was one guy was the guy who supplied you with the video transmitter, and the other one was the guy who supplied you with the video camera, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's discuss kind of like how you got started with this, because what's interesting is what you used was what was commercially available at the time.
Right.
Oh, there's the photo right there. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's on the right, it's your boss, and on the left is your brother-in-law. He popped up for a second and disappeared.
I had that, yeah, disappeared.
By the way, really great photography of you guys. So that's kind of cool. And that's kind of what's neat about this also is like your video, the photography, everything is really great. And it made something that was really, it's like a movie. It's more than a video, I'd say. And it was kind of like, you just sit there and you watch it and you're like, oh, hell yeah, this is exactly it. But I mean, what you were looking at using was commercially available products. So the one thing that you used was a video transmitter. I think you started discussing it earlier. And what was that video transmitter that your boss loaned you from the music store?
It was called a video sender, and it was made to accept a video signal and transmit it to other TVs in the house. That's because the VCRs were still pretty expensive at the time, $300 or $400 in 80s money. So
yeah, it's probably $1,000 each. Yeah,
you'd want to play a tape on the VCR and transmit it to somebody upstairs in the other TV. You know, that's what that was for, just use in the house.
Yeah, those things work great because I happen to know personally because one of my dad's friends decided to try one of these things out, or he had it in his house, and all of a sudden the neighbors down the street were starting to watch porn on channel 3. So the cops showed up and he got himself in a whole bunch of trouble. My dad had to get him out of it. But yeah, those things, they do provide a lot of, they're pretty decent at the time. I never personally used one myself, but it was interesting. But the problem was that the signal it put out was not really strong enough. So you had to have an antenna, a consumer or antenna for watching television. They broadcast on VHF, right? So channels 3 and 4.
Right.
So you had one guy, you had a ground station with a guy holding a consumer antenna and following you around the plane around with it so we can get the video signal, right?
Yeah. That was one of the ways we tried to boost the signal, or boost the reception, I guess. Another thing we did, besides that little single whip that it had on there, we made Brian made a dipole antenna to help the transmission strength. And together with the dipole and the receiving antenna, we managed to get a fair amount, almost up to half a mile range out of that.
Wow. So Mark, we had a couple questions.
There's a question in the crew we missed before. Wait a second. What was your absolutely first RC flight, or when was it?
The absolute
first RC flight. Yeah.
God, I can't remember because I was on the road and playing in a copy band at the time. I could not say what year that was, but I've been flying for quite a few years before I started the video camera. It had to be the late 70s when I started RC.
Okay.
It was pretty new. So what are the tight shorts? Because that was the one thing someone asked me about. Be sure to ask him about the tight shorts from the 80s.
Yeah. Lauren from my group wanted to know about those as well.
Well, people have commented in their messages about that, just having fun with me. And
yeah, I happen to have those pictures of me in those tight shorts in the 80s as well, so don't worry about it too much. Your first FPV flight, tell us about that, when you finally got that thing going.
The first FPV, flying strictly by television.
Right.
Well, it took a long process to be able to get to that point, because all during that time, the video signal would cut in and out, and you never. It took a while to really depend on it. And then plus another thing is the video screen that we had. You know, it was reflections in there. You can't really.
Right.
If you ever tried to watch TV outdoors, well,
Yeah.
you know, anybody could probably understand what I'm talking about with all the reflections and plus the graininess of the video. You know, it just took a long time. When I got rid of the reflections and the video was starting to get more steady and regular, dependable, that's when I started to actually just watch the TV. And by then you start getting to know the territory around there, which is a big deal too, because if you don't know the territory, it's very easy to get lost. And you saw that when I ran out of fuel a mile away, and I absolutely didn't know what that territory was, and I could not find the plane in the air. It was a dot out there somewhere, but I just didn't see it. And that's why I had to just fly the thing. In retrospect, what I should have done is just circled around and
Yeah.
But back then you're panicking, you know, and you just want to bring it down as best as you can.
So Mark, do you have a question?
Not right now. No.
Okay. I saw something pop up. Okay. So yeah, there was the thing that is interesting, at least for, we were discussing this before. What for me, I did something similar to you as far as I was a line of sight pilot, and my first time I was flying an RC plane with FPV gear on, I didn't really trust it. And so what you end up doing is you end up looking at the monitor, looking at the plane, looking at the monitor, looking at the plane. You're kind of in and out of both worlds.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then that was at some point you finally had to give up on, or at least I found that you had to give up on just trying to do both and fly one way or the other. So that was kind of, how many times did it take you to do that? Was it quite a few flights before you felt comfortable enough to look just at the TV at the television?
Yeah, it was quite a few flights, and we just had to work out all the little things. And even at the beginning, there was a lot of loose connections that just made everything, you know, in and out all the time. Got rid of that. Well, then it was the angle of the antenna didn't match up right. It would drop out. So it was just a number of things that we had to work out before we could trust the TV.
Then your first FPV landing, so that was just relying on the electronics of the time, relying on the television screen to land it.
Yeah.
Were you outside? Were you inside a van? Were you?
Yeah, out in the back of the van, watching the TV there. That was, yeah, I mean, it was far enough out. There was grass there. It was just the right time for me to give it a try. You know, unfortunately, I kind of let it stall, so it just kind of, you know, you saw the, it's in the video, so.
Right, it kind of bounced around a little bit, but you did land it.
Yeah, yeah,
and then,
yeah.
Did you get better at that as time went on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got better at lining up. I practiced a few runs where you line up down on the road, did a real long run, you know, just to practice that. And it was real fun learning that, you know, just trying to bring them in gently. And the horizon one is at the top of the screen, so you could tell when the plane was level, and you didn't want to bring it up to too high to make it stall. So that's the kind of things you had to learn. Nowadays
we have flight simulators, so RC flight simulators, like Great Plains makes one, Real Plains, Real Flight, yeah, I guess up to 9 right now. So you can actually plan your flights. You can practice that over and over again for free. And if you crash, you hit the space bar and you get back to flying the next, you know. So I'm sure that makes you feel good knowing that you can get that hard flight experience for free or very inexpensively. And then the last thing that you showed was losing the plane. So I guess you have lost orientation when you're out flying. Yeah, I didn't know what direction it was flying towards.
because you saw where the video just totally dropped out, and I'm between going from the TV, can I recognize anything, up to where's the plane? Do I see the speck anywhere? I finally had to just look at the screen and try to figure out what to do, and just fly it the best as I could.
Yeah, and I think everyone's kind of gone through that before. A period where you lose orientation, and we got to keep in mind that back in the day when you were doing this, you either had video. If you lost video or if you lost your transmitter, the plane was done.
Yeah.
So at least with video, you could, I think the transmitter, if you're losing that, was probably more important, because with video, if you lose video, you could probably go outside and hear it, especially in your earlier times, because it's only about half a mile away, and you could probably hear the plane and kind of keep it up and maybe bring it back just by listening and find it in the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, but still, that was, man, to think about what you did was just insane. Darren, you have some questions next. We're going to get into the Bixler style plane.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next plane in the video, which was a really interesting plane, because you put everything with regards to propulsion in a pod on the top at the back. Would you mind discussing a little bit about that plane and what was inside it with regards to like the power unit and how the video system progressed?
With the engine or the payload?
Both.
Okay, well, yeah, it was a K&B brand, 61 size engine, and the only thing up there was the engine and the fuel tank, and the servo for the throttle, I guess, and then which left that whole bottom area wide open for payload. And I had a little plexiglass screen about this big that I put in the front and angled angled to where the wind, it wouldn't be a flat surface. The windshield was like that, and the camera was angled a little bit downward, because I'd loved to get the view of the ground. I'd love to just cruise around the ground. Just as long as I could see the horizon, I knew that I was level. And so it left a lot of open room for the bigger transmitters that I would get later. Plenty for, we were using NiCad batteries, and so I got a larger battery pack put together besides the one in the first one. And it flew very well, did a lot of good work for me.
Awesome. And that was a 7-foot wingspan, is that right?
Yeah.
And that was where you first started using the 432 megahertz video?
Yeah, around that time I got my ham license, and I got a 1-watt transmitter, and that opened up a whole new can of worms, I guess, for different problems.
Yeah, but I mean, getting the ham license wasn't that straightforward, was it? You had to go through quite a few hoops to learn.
It was comparatively easy for television to just learn the Morse code at 5 words a minute. Back then, that plus a little bit of theory, and you could transmit on television. It was, to me, that was a small price to pay for getting, because I wanted a bigger camera big time. I kept looking all over the place, and when I saw they had that, well, I had to do whatever it took.
And also the 1-watt video transmitter. So, but then you said that opened up another can of worms. That was, I guess, limiting the transmitter for the actual control. Was that?
Yeah, it produced jitters on the servos. Let's see, the TV transmitter was at dipole on the outside. Well, the receiver of the RC was just a few inches away from it, and I ran the RC antenna. It was the lead was about 3 feet long, and I ran that along the inside the wing out to the right side. But with the TV transmitting 1 watt right there, and the receiver just a black box that's unshielded, it just wreaked havoc. Everything started going into jitters, so that was the problem.
Yeah, don't
Was that
worry,
the-
Larry. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't worry,
no.
Larry. We have the same issues today, just with digital signals. If you use Crossfire and digital servers, you will have the same problems.
Oh, well. Yeah.
Was this the box that you made a little metal box to protect it from the 1 watt? Did that make a big difference, or?
No, it didn't. It didn't knock it all out. So I think just by going to an 80 milliwatt transmitter instead of the 1 watt, that helped out a lot. Plus putting the transmitter antenna in the tail, and then putting a little loop in the coax, that helped to eliminate RF from getting back into the payload section. All those little things, just made it where finally I could sit back and do some long distance flying without worrying.
Yeah. So back then it was exactly the same. More separation is a lot better, because it's one of the discussions these days. Okay. Right. And then obviously you said that you had the nice color video, you had decent picture, and that's when you could start really cruising around and enjoying yourself.
Yeah. Just enjoy the scenery down below.
Well, not just down below though, was it, Larry? we saw that cloud section in the video. How was that the first time?
Oh God. It was like, well, you know how you're getting up close to the cloud line, and I don't know, it's just weird going up to the cloud line, and then all of a sudden you're in fog pretty much for a little while. And when you break through and get above the clouds, it's like a whole different, it was like opening a whole new world up there and just cruising around, and you see off to the horizon all these clouds. And what's really struck me is when I was circling around and you see the clouds and then you see the shadow on the ground below there. It was just real exciting for me to see that for the first time. And I'm sure by now you guys have seen many instances of it, but to me, for the first time, it was pretty exciting.
That's awesome. So with the video tracking, one of the things we saw in the video was you started using a motorized ground station, which is probably the first time that was ever used for RC. I mean, people use them today, but purely for video. You had both transmit and video on that. How did that work, and how did it work out for you?
Yeah, what it was based on was an FM tracking system where you had this antenna, and you'll see it on the video at the very top. There's 2 dual antennas. Well, it works off of the FM transmitter. The TV subcarrier, the audio subcarrier, is FM. So what it does from the plane, the FM comes in, and if the antennas are not receiving that at the exact same time, they give you an error signal. Well, I use that error signal to operate the AC powered antenna rotator. I had to build a little circuit with some triacs and amplifiers, but it took that error signal and it would turn on the motor to the antenna for just a moment until those antennas got exactly even with the plane out there. So whenever the plane moved off to a little to the side, well, these antennas would try to match them up again. And the tracking system, the electronics was something ham operators use for searching for transmitters, and then the Radio Shack antenna rotator was a separate device, and I just made something that made them work together.
Awesome.
The first ground station. Yeah.
And it worked off of a frequency modulation. So if I guess it turned one way, the errors got worse. It started turning back the other way, and awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I think the point that some people have commented, I've read a lot of the comments about the video, and they're talking about how good the color quality was from back then. Keep in mind, this is you recorded on a VCR, and the video was, so kind of let people know this, first of all, that the camera system you used, when we went to the color CCD, that was quite a bit heavier than the black and white cameras, right?
No, they were about the same. They were
really?
the same format with the auto iris. Yeah, it was pretty much exactly the same weight and everything.
Okay.
The internals probably had a lot more electronics inside, but they all fit in the same form factor.
Yeah, the thing is though that these cameras at the time, they were putting out VGA 640 by 480, and so what we're dealing with today, we were going over this just yesterday. A really good analog FPV camera is around 1200 lines, but a lot of these are 800 lines and some are 600 lines. So we're not really that different than we were. But what was different was that those things had glass lenses on them and big, heavy glass lenses as well. So that the quality was actually really decent off these things because they were using for security, for like monitoring when people show up, or, they put them in liquor stores and they need to use them in case the place get held up. They need to get a good video or capture of everybody going through. So the weight was the same, but you built this plane with that whole setup, just the camera itself was 3 pounds, and the plane you were flying around with at the time was 13 pounds.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
that's right.
we were kind of wondering that 6.1 motor you had, KNB 6.1 motor, was that struggling to keep up with that plane flying, or was it kind of the plane kind of a little bit lethargic because of the weight?
It didn't struggle. It was not a hot rodder, let's say that, but it managed to carry it around pretty well. The weight always had, it had a little bit of sluggishness, but what do you expect? I didn't expect anything, hot rodder to be flying around, but it really did the job pretty good.
I'd just like to add one quick thing that you mentioned yesterday about the cameras, which I thought was really interesting. Then Mark's got a question. But the actual sensor size on those cameras was actually smaller than what we're using today. Because you said it was a 1/2-inch sensor, whereas today we're about that for average cameras, but some like the Micro Eagle are an inch and I think it was 1.25 inches.
So nowadays you're getting a lot more lines of resolution. From what I hear, it's more of the transmitter bandwidth, I guess, that kind of limits what you actually see. So I guess that's why people are commenting that the video hasn't gotten any better. It's probably the cameras are better, but the transmitter is not giving it all to you of its capabilities.
I mean, to be honest, the video looks really good. I mean, I've seen stuff recorded off of a TV that's worse picture quality with VCR. Then it looks incredible for what it is. But sorry, Mark.
Yep. Davey or FPV has an interesting background question. What were other RC pilots thinking about your experiments? So the purist RC modelers, what did they think about your experience with all the camera and video transmission stuff?
Well, there was I don't know. There was several people who were real supportive. But there's others like those free, what do you call them? Those other guys that had kind of, came out on this field that was out in the middle of nowhere. They were, what do you call them? Free flighters is kind of comes to mind. They didn't fly at clubs, and I don't know. Some of them were they kind of ignored me when I was out there. So. They were doing their thing and I was doing mine.
Great. There was also another question from Stickmix FPV. How much fuel did you carry, and how long were your flight times back then with the plane, with all the camera stuff and everything in?
How much fuel did I carry?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
I can't remember how many ounces was in there, but I usually had a 15-minute flight. 15 minutes was a pretty good time for me to fly around and do what I needed to do. So 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So back to you, Steve.
Well, one of the things before I get off this, I just wanted to find out a little bit more about was the weight of what you were carrying. So the cameras were about 3 pounds. What about the video transmitter? That was about another pound as well.
I think the whole thing was 3 pounds altogether.
Oh, okay, video transmitter. So the whole package was 3 pounds.
With battery, yeah. And
okay.
I built a little lightweight aluminum box of my own that was to reduce the weight on that. Usually they come in a big old cast iron or cast aluminum box, but I put them in a real lightweight box. Tried to keep the weight down as much as I could.
Okay, so altogether it was about 3 pounds. And
yeah,
that color camera at the time, you said your brother-in-law sold you one for how much?
$800, I believe it was. I paid him for that one.
Okay, yeah. And you're running with 80 milliwatts on 433 megahertz?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, and the other day I showed you just a little bit of a comparison that something was about the size of, I don't know, about a 50-cent piece. So it was a camera, it was a video transmitter, and a little omnidirectional antenna selling for $20. Doesn't have INAV on it, so there's no flight controller. But this is something you could pretty much take off, put on any plane you're flying. And so, yeah, here's something you're flying around in. I'm estimating your planes were at the time, because this video transmitter, as I recall, looking at the advertisement, it was about $400 for that as well. So right. $1,200 at the time, which is probably worth about $3,000 right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's just really insane. I get nervous putting a GoPro up because that's a lot of money in the sky. So
yeah, but that's why I was real careful about what I did, as careful as I could be anyway. And but I always thought of it as some people buy motorcycles, some people buy boats, but I was flying these, and I had a lot of fun with it. So it was well worth it to me.
And that's the whole thing, is enjoying the passion of it all. Speaking of passion, you also did some kind of crazy things as well, because if this was not crazy enough, you also got into shooting off bottle rockets in these planes?
Yeah. I had to try that once or twice. I mean,
how did you do that? Because people might want to know how to do it just for their own personal references. Not that it's a good idea.
They were ignited by model rocket igniters, which is basically a nichrome wire. And in order to light them, I had to have a nichrome battery, and I took 2 wires over to a servo, and I made a little circuit board that had 4 little traces on it, and I put 1 wire onto the servo arm, the servo wiper, and the 4 wires going to each rocket on those 4 traces of the circuit board. So I had the servo in one position, and as I would make the servo wipe to the right, it would touch one of the traces and make a connection to the nichrome wire on one of the rockets. And then when I shoot off another one, I move the servo just a little bit more over, and it would make connection with the next trace and shoot off another rocket. So I had up to 4. And I mounted them on my wing with just some straws, I guess, and put the wooden stick of the bottle rocket in there, and then it was just held in place by having the wires twisted around the fuse. And I flew around, and when it took off, it just went out from the straw, and that's about all it was.
By the way, like about 8 months ago, the FAA put out a notice saying we're not allowed to shoot anything out of a plane anymore.
Wow.
So yeah, you're ahead of your time, and you could do that back when it was legal, or was not illegal at the time, I should say. But so that was absolutely fabulous. Yeah, there's now we're going to talk about the last plane. Well, unfortunately, this plane, the one that was the Bixler style plane with the CCD camera on it, it unfortunately had the most expensive plane crash in the history of RC at the time, right?
Pretty much, I guess.
Yeah, you were the first FPV pilot to lose a plane, or actually a couple planes by this point.
Yeah. You're talking about that one where it was real high and the wings separated?
Yes.
Yeah. that was real unfortunate. I'd been using rubber bands pretty good while I didn't realize that they'd kind of lost their elasticity. And one day there was a storm coming up, and I wanted to fly up in those clouds, you know, get into the middle of it. And they were off in the distance blowing toward me. And I took the plane up there and flew around and started to get water on the windshield, you know. And then all of a sudden it took a quick jump. And I said, good God, what is that? So I thought, hell, I need to bring it in pretty quick. So I took it in a dive, the worst thing I could have done. Took it in a dive, and then the wind just took that wing and it sheared off, and I just lost the signal. You could see it in the video. And the plane, the fuselage just took a dive. I'm sure I didn't see it, but I'm sure it did, because it's like a fin on the back and weight in front. What does that look like to you? A bomb?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the wing floated back. I did get the wing. Never found the rest of it. Expensive video camera and the transmitter and all that was lost.
I think that's kind of the part of the hobby as well, understanding. I mean, sometimes these things happen. Sometimes you lose planes. Sometimes you're working on a video transmitter, or common mistake is people miswire their video cameras, the FPV cameras, and they get the ground and power mixed up, and they end up blowing up their cameras as they're building the thing. And it's really frustrating when this happens. So I mean, people come on and just bitch their head off, like, I lost a $40 camera because I got this backwards, you know. Or you lose a plane as well. So it is very frustrating when that does happen. We're going to look at now what's going on. You had one last plane before you actually went off to other things in your life. It was
the yellow one. It went back to the twin boom.
Right.
Yeah, and I had to use, I mean, on that other one though, before I crashed, it had a side camera that I got some real neat views with. They started coming out with those cheap black and whites by then, but they look like a pack of cigarettes or a pack of cards. And that was real fun to have that little side camera, because you get a whole different view when you're going around things. And so I ended up having to use that camera on the next plane, because I couldn't afford to get another color camera, CCD camera.
And by that time, it's kind of like you felt like you've done pretty much what you needed to do with the FPV.
Yeah, I felt like I'd gotten pretty far, but there were still some things I hadn't gone up in the clouds, above the clouds, I think, or maybe I had with the color. Yeah, I hadn't I? I can't remember the video now, but it was with that black and white that I did a 3-mile long range test anyway.
All right. So yeah, distance-wise, 3 miles out. First of all, on 72 megahertz, isn't that kind of scary?
Well, not really, because I had that overhead antenna, and I could flip to that overhead antenna to help me out. That helped out a whole bunch. So take any worry of that. Except when I was trying the long distance flight, by then I had that whip antenna coming out of the plane too, right? So they were both parallel. And but the thing is, when you go parallel, anytime you go in a bank, well, the antennas start not lining up right, and that's how I could tell that I was going to lose the signal if I continued to go farther out. So I'd go out and circle around. If it'd be fine, I'd go farther, and then bank, circle around, and then finally at the very end, about 3 miles out, it started to. You could tell the RC start to freak out, and that's about as far as I would fly.
You could also were flying in kind of the same area all the time, and you were starting to recognize the roads, and which direction you were going, so you know how to get back.
Exactly. There was just one long road that I could follow down and come back.
And each time you had a crossing that was a mile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still very gutsy to do that. Yeah, that was I also wanted to just ask about the electronics, because this is the thing that I guess your boss at the music store decided to, you guys decided to put a microphone inside the RC plane so you can hear the motor, right?
Right.
That was Bob who came up with this. He actually wired it all up himself, or?
Yeah, Brian, my
Brian.
boss, he had a little bit of experience. I think he even he put together his own television from a kit way back in his young days. So he knew a little bit about electronics, and he put together a little op amp and add some power to it and a really little electric microphone, and that's all it took. I mean, it was a very simple circuit.
Right.
And it helped out a whole bunch, because when you hear the engine, it just kind of gives you a better feel for what's going on. But that's what kind of triggered me to say, you know, I could do something like that. Well, I'd like to do something like that. So from then on, I started reading about transistors and op amps and capacitors and everything, and which led me into things that I could make little circuits and put them together to do bigger things. And that's what led into the talking compass. You know, if you take things one little section at a time, you can actually make them work together.
Right, and that was really a brilliant thing, because at the time, this was, I think, around 1988, somewhere around that time period.
Right, yeah.
And as I recall, it was Bill Clinton who came up with opening up the GPS to consumers, and that was later on. That's probably 5 or 6 years later. So in order to know where you were going, we could not rely on GPS. That was off limits to consumers. So you had to have a talking compass, which knew which direction. It was something that you came up with, and it was actually published in a magazine, right? The Talking Compass?
Yeah, one of the versions of it.
One of the versions, yeah, a handheld one, so people can walk around and know. But the idea was, if you can talk about this, which is, the plane will tell you what direction you're heading. So you'd say north, 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 north. And then you guys started figuring out, if you point the antenna that you're following it with, you kind of know, like, I'm pointing it south and it's going north. That means it's coming back to me right now. But if it's heading east, it's going away from me. Yeah,
that knowing where the plane is flying to, its bearing is what you call it, right? Knowing its bearing is only half the story, because you have to know where it is compared to you. And I would use the tracking antenna to help tell me where the plane was. So you use both information together, you know how to fly it back again. It's when I lost one of those halves that I got into trouble, as you see on the video.
Oh, okay. So yeah, there's early triangulation. Mark, we had a question?
No question right now. I'm just typing in the chat a little bit. Two guys are asking in the chat if you would be okay with it if they use your music as background music for their future FPV videos. They like it so much.
It rocks, man. It is actually very addictive. And,
just give me credit, I guess.
Yeah.
Give me credit.
Yeah, so guys, you hear it. Give him credit, link his video, put in the description, and then it seems to be fine.
Nice to know you're going viral now, 30 years later. You go back on tour again, you still have the Gibson Les Paul?
I don't know if that's in the cards, but it certainly is intriguing.
Yeah, okay, the rock and roll.
Well, there's one more question regarding the topic. Did you ever know of others experimenting with FPV at the time of your own endeavors?
No. At the time, well, I mean, when I started, I certainly didn't, but there was a couple of videos that came out maybe 2 years into playing, and one guy from New Zealand, one guy from California, and yeah, they had done it, but it didn't really, wasn't anything I could use, so we didn't really help each other out much. I did converse with them a little bit.
Yeah, there was another guy on YouTube. I just recently saw a video from him who found your video, and then he was digging a little bit deeper into it and tried to find other people doing that in this time frame or area. I think your video or your footage was still the oldest one he was able to find. I will try to find the video and link it in the chat too.
Yeah, that would be good.
Oh, is that Curry Kitten?
Yeah, it was Curry Kitten. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's Darren's friends, right?
He lives near me, but I don't actually know him. Maybe one day.
Yeah.
Well, I do have to thank him because it was he who put my video. He kind of did a little history thing and linked to my video, and it just really took off from there. So I have to thank him a lot for that.
So
Okay.
now it comes down to the point of which is interesting, which is we were talking before about the STEM doing things, and I think what this hobby is about, especially, you're kind of a living example of this, which is when you want to do something, like for example, in our group, people get on and they look at what we're doing and they say, I want to get involved with that as well. I want to fly FPV. I want to have all the cool stuff. Where do I buy this plane at with all set up? And even to this day, it's like, we'll give you all the information you need and we'll back you up. I mean, I don't care if it's 2 a.m, you write a question, you might get an answer in 5 minutes if you ask the question properly, with enough information so we can answer it. But it's something that you have to do yourself and you have to strive for yourself. And when you do that, there's a lot of times people don't necessarily want to do that. They kind of want the easy road in life and not have to apply themselves. But when you start applying yourself, then all of a sudden other things in your life open up. A good example is Mark himself, which is when he first showed up, he did not really want to speak English all that much, right? Yeah.
It was pretty hard, and luckily, thanks to you and also other guys, Darren, Glenn, I had some practice, and now it's working way better.
So,
and thanks to alcohol, I think, Mark.
So, you actually work for an American company, which is interesting because my wife works for a German company, but the American company is Dell, and they came to you, I guess part of a promotion was available, and you had to be able to speak English pretty well, right?
Yep, because my new boss right now is living in Scotland, and yeah, he only speaks English and a few words of German.
Oh. Yeah, okay. So that's the thing. I mean, when you start applying yourself, other things happen. In your particular situation, what happened was, Larry, that you started off by, I don't know, it was rockets, then it was trying to do aviation, going to school for aviation, and then it was music. But then what happened was the RC hobby brought you into another direction in life, which was electronics. Yeah. So back in 1994, you got your 2-year degree?
Right.
Yeah. In electronics. And from that, you ended up going to work in electronics, right?
Yeah, I got a job as an electronics technician. And every day, I swear, I told myself, this is like working on my hobby all day long. It was like working on your hobby. I mean, some project or something. So it was real rewarding to do that.
So that is exactly what we want to hear. We want, the passion turns into other things. And when we look in this hobby, we've got people in the group who we're not all doing the same things. We have people that get involved in different aspects of the modeling community. We got people who build their own battery packs. We got people who do, one guy in our group that we were talking to last week, his whole thing was building radio controlled planes out of Dollar Tree foam. So, and he had a whole thing about that as well. Yeah. But what I wanted to ask you about was, on your video, you mentioned it as well. You said, I can finally get out of the music business and then go to work in electronics. So was the music kind of like the music career, was that the dream to follow it? Like, I want to be a rock star. What was it like? Was it just frustrating after a while? Was it getting old? Was it?
Yeah, I kind of came, after writing several songs and I was starting to get up there in age, and I thought, well, I don't know if I could keep writing songs that are, for an album and or two or three or four albums worth and all that. And by then, the electronics were just starting to interest me so much that it really became not much of a question there. So I decided to let the music fall by the wayside. And I had so much fun flying FPV,
Yeah, it's interesting also that the passion for music, there are different aspects of that. People, if you're playing professional sports, if you can sink 3-pointers from half court and you get 30, 40 points a game, I don't care how old you are or what you look like, you're going to be playing on the NBA. You'll always have a career as long as you can keep doing that. But in the music industry, you had the look. I mean, you go back and look at the videos, you look like the rock star. Your sound is great. We all love it. And yet it didn't happen for you. So it's just kind of like, I can imagine the frustration that you're experiencing at the time.
Well, I can say that I had my fun with it, and I have no regrets. It was some of the greatest years of my life.
Fantastic. So, oh yeah, being the rock and roll star and going out and doing that stuff, and you feeling the passion. But after a while, the passion kind of like you did it for quite a while. You from what, about age 19 to probably in your mid 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a long time doing it. And then what happened after you got this 2-year degree, you went off and spent 9 more years getting your 4-year degree. So this was working nights and weekends, right?
Right. Well, I went to school at night and worked during the day, full 8 hours, and went to school at night. So that's why it took actually 10 years of going to night school and working school during the summer, just taking as much school as I can to get that real 4-year engineering degree.
That's fantastic. And that was kind of, I guess, and then, so the question people will have, they've asked already, which is, why did you give up? And it was because...
Give up music?
No, give up flying RC planes.
Oh, hell. Yeah, I had all my time was invested in work or going to school. And by then I had already, flown above the clouds and long distance, and I was trying other things like trying to at least give some sort of indicator, telemetry coming back as to if the range was about to drop out. I was trying to get
RSSI. Yeah.
It was a voltage controlled, a voltage on the receiver that might tell you if it goes down, well, then you're about to lose signal. I was trying to get that back to me, so I'd know if I was about to lose the RC. But I just never could pursue that. I just didn't have enough time. So right. I let it all lapse,
I guess that's kind of an important point here, is that there's just other interests that you'll have in your lifetime, and you kind of follow a different direction with the other interests. And because of that, you ended up going to night school and doing all these things, and all of a sudden you didn't really have time for RC planes anymore. But it wasn't because you didn't not like RC planes anymore. It's just that you had other parts of your life that were starting to take off.
Yes.
So we're going to do something fun right now, and I'm going to put Mark on the spot. I'm sure he's really excited to hear about this. We're going to talk to you about what has changed since your time, because you walked away from this for about 20, 25 years ago.
Right.
And a lot has changed since you left, and we're going to start going over some aspects of what we've been up to since then and what has changed, and try to get your reaction and kind of show you what's been going on. So Mark, do you have...
Yeah, where to start? That's the question here. I mean, back then you flew with your gas engines and liquid fuel, and the only electronics in your planes were the camera system, the video transmitter, and your RC receiver. Today everything is electrical, so if someone tells you today you have a long-range FPV plane with 15 minutes flight time, he would smile at you. Today the planes fly about an hour, 2 hours or so, just on the LiPo battery. We have all this flight controller stuff. Actual flight controllers have more computing capacity than the space shuttle back in the 70s. And we are flying our seaplanes with it. And Steve, you showed the flight controller before at the beginning of the stream.
Right. I was hoping to do is have you open up a stream, turn on your desktop, and then start showing some videos as to what they've been up to, like some interesting videos, and we can kind of comment about them as you pull them up.
Yeah,
So,
of course, I can do that. Let me just open also a screen.
I can ask Darren in the meantime. Darren, what's with? Oh, here we go. The background is really cool. There we go.
Okay, so let's quickly search some videos with long range stuff, and I open my screen share. Here we go. And let's say if a particular video you want to show, then we can look at that. Otherwise, I will just catch something like this one. This was a pretty great record flight of a guy called JCat RC. He made a flight 44 kilometers out with a vector flight controller. I think when was the video made? In 2017. So it's already a while ago. And you see, back then you just had your talking compass to estimate where you have to fly to come back. And here you have a full-blown OSD, graphical OSD with artificial horizon, all that stuff.
So if you look on the right, you can see he's at 1,260 or 1,270. Is that feet, or I don't know if he's feet or meters?
Yeah, I think it could be meters.
Okay. Right, he looks pretty well high up there. So he's out in the middle of nowhere in a farm field. Now he's flying over, looks like a populated area. But the idea is you can read how far up he is. At the very top, you can see he's drawing 4 amps, which a little under 5 amps, which is a decent amount, but not very much. It's very efficient. On the top left, you can see his RSSI, which is something you were talking about before, which is about 65. And you can also see that he has been up there for about 32 minutes so far. And you can see how far away he is from home. This is not really our OSD, but we have similar things to this. He also has the bars up there as well. And then if he gets into a situation where the RSSI drops, and that sometimes is what happens, is it'll go from 59 to 0 fairly quickly. It could happen. What the flight controller does is it says, oh my gosh, I lost radio contact, so I'm going to turn around and return to home. I'm going to go back to where the plane first armed. And by that point, you should have radio contact again. Usually it happens within 20, 30 seconds after you start turning around with return to home. You can get your plane back and get control going again.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's a fantastic video. We're going to go into another one here.
So another thing is not only the OSD related. We back then when you buy or when you set up a new plane, if I remember correctly from other model RC pilots that fly sky models, scale models, sorry.
Yes.
You have to do all the trimming, all the mixing very precisely. You have to set up your rates even today, and all that stuff to keep the plane stable. You have to trim it correctly. I think that was also back then when you flew. If it's not trimmed well, it won't fly good. And today we have stuff like auto-tune, where you just fly around, do some maneuvers, rolls, pitches, and all that stuff. And the flight controller will do everything on its own and will set up your flap throws. It will set up your trim and everything automatically.
So yeah, it takes all the guesswork out of it. And what we tell people is basically if you can get the plane set up and get it trimmed manually so it flies decently in manual, you'll have a very nice experience flying with INAV, because what it will add to it is flight stabilization as well. Oh, look at this. What's this, Mark?
Yeah, back then you had an antenna tracker that was working with RF signal strength. We still have such stuff today, and also what were we talking about recently? A voice-activated antenna tracker.
Right. He said, Larry, turn the antenna to the right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And today we have such kind of stuff that uses the real-time telemetry of our plane, of our flight controller, to know where the plane is, and then automatically calculates an angle and points the antenna straight to the plane. So we can achieve even bigger ranges than you did with your Omni antenna systems or with your Yagi antennas. Also, we have much more transmission power today, of course.
So that allows us to go out much, much further. And a lot of times we're kind of limited to just the range we can get on our headsets. When you use these antenna trackers, ground stations, you can go out much further. And that's how we're getting the 20, 30 mile out with these planes.
Wow.
What do you think of this so far?
Oh, it's so intriguing, so super intriguing. I love it.
Great. There's that Planck plane. Do you happen to still have that plane? If you look in history, that flight we had the other day up at the Matterhorn that we were looking at, that was, hey, there's Powell. If you go into history, you should be able to find it.
Yeah, and then we have also other stuff with INAV.
Oh, waypoints.
Yeah, waypoint missions, for example. So you don't even need to control your planes by yourself anymore. You just upload a waypoint mission you plan before, and then your craft will automatically fly it. Okay, I accidentally catched a video of a multi-rotor, but it's pretty much the same. You can do that with a plane.
Idea, right?
Yeah.
The idea is that you start your plane off. You can even have it take off in auto launch. We'll get into that in a minute, I'm sure. But the plane will take off and it will fly to different waypoints. And at each waypoint, it knows it has to be a certain altitude, and then you have another waypoint set, and so it goes from there to the next spot. So you can plan really elaborate missions because you can have up to 60 waypoints on these missions, right?
Yeah, exactly. 60 is the limit right now for all actual flight controllers. Right,
and they go beyond the range of the actual radio itself. Before INAV, if it flew out of range, INAV would bring the plane back. But now there's ways, you were telling us just yesterday, of telling INAV to turn off, return to home, so that you can keep flying your mission.
Yeah, exactly. There was a feature request in the past that people wanted to do INAV missions outside of the transmitter range and not trigger return to home automatically. And yeah, the devs have implemented this feature, but it's a little bit hidden for security reasons, as it can be pretty dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. The other thing that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago is that there's actually this little cellular add-on to these planes into INAV for your flight controller, so that if you're flying outside of range, you can send a text message to the plane to come back home.
Yeah, exactly. I knew about that in the back of my head, and I didn't really look into that before. But after our talk recently, I saw that you now can put a SIM module or mobile wireless module into your plane. And if you fly a mission over long distances, you can call this number or send an SMS, and you will get telemetry data back, like the position, the speed, the distance from home, and all that stuff. And you even can send an SMS to your plane to tell it to return to you at the home point. If you see, okay, the battery voltage is pretty low right now, just send another SMS, and it will return home automatically without any radio control.
That is absolutely amazing. So we're looking at a flight. Right now, the plane is flying around. It's going to en route to waypoints. So it knows that it's gone to its first waypoint, or whatever waypoint it is. It's going to another one. It says one last waypoint is reached. The plane circles home indefinitely. Okay, yep. So then you have to take your radio control over and land it.
Exactly. No auto landing yet on INAV, but there's another flight control system called autopilot, and this is able to completely auto land in a specific area, in a specific direction, completely from its own or by
I'm
its
sure
own.
we'll get that. Yeah. INAV is open source firmware, so that what we have is we have someone, about 4 guys who are working on it full time, or not full time. They have full time jobs, and they end up having to do this on nights and weekends. So sometimes the features come out kind of slow. It would be really nice if they were somehow funded so that we could have them working on it full time for us, and the features would come out much faster. But even so, it's just night and day. It's amazing how fast things are going with the technology. Hey Mark, do you have that 360 video?
A 360, yeah, we can look for that. Give me a second.
Yeah, we were showing off also just yesterday. Somebody was the mini Goblin. He took it up to which is a Strix plane.
Yeah.
Took it up. That was we're looking at the video right now.
Yeah.
So
this is another video than we looked yesterday, because I just found a video where I can actually drag around and look around from my own.
Okay, yeah. So this is a 360 camera he's showing off right now.
Yeah.
So you can see that there's another plane behind him following along, and we actually have another group called INAV Radar that has technology so that you can know where your buddy's plane is just by looking on your OSD screen if you can't visually see him. So if he falls behind you, you can see where he's at exactly behind you. But what we're looking at here is a 360 camera where he's flying around, and Mark is able to turn the look, so you can try and look at the plane. You can move it forward and look forward as well and see where he's flying to. So this technology is absolutely exciting, and this is just kind of very different, very new. How about that video we had yesterday? We're looking at this guy was flying over a city. It was absolutely stellar. This one's really cool video. I love this. He's flying FPV and flying to the trees. His buddy's chasing him. So
yeah, let me quickly find it.
Okay. By the way, this is really hard for Mark to be able to both speak English and find the stuff at the same time. So I really appreciate it.
So
there it is.
No, this is not the video we were searching. City flight. No, that's. What was the city? Wasn't it over Dubai?
Yeah, it might have been Dubai.
Oh, with that.
Don't even remember.
Here we go. Plane. Yeah, I don't know what I have searched yesterday exactly.
It was an AR wing. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Really kind
of. Go ahead for now. I will search the video and then I can tell you when I found it.
Okay, so you're looking at all this stuff, and we're talking. One of the things that I think that what happens a lot in the group is that people come in and they get a little bit overwhelmed as far as looking at all the things that INAV can do. So sometimes it takes people a while just to lurk around and see what's going on. And I think that's where Larry's at right now. There's the video. This is amazing. Have you seen this? He's flying over Dubai. This is an AR wing. This is a 900 millimeter wing. It is one of the most beloved planes. You can see also the lid on there is a 3D printed lid, I believe. So at the very top. So he's flying over Dubai, absolutely stellar. This plane is not horribly expensive. It's about just the foam itself is around under $70. But the camera he has on, is cost for well, I'll put it to you this way: what you're flying with, Larry, you can probably buy 4 of these cameras. We were flying with back in the 80s with that color camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can buy 4 of these. In today's money. So absolutely beautiful. You're looking for something else? I guess your video froze.
No, it's fine. You can go ahead. I switch back to the chat.
Okay, we're back on here. Yeah, so what I was saying, he also find auto launch, because that's a feature I think that he'd be Larry would kind of like, even though you know how to launch a plane. This is one of the features that Mark is actually helps everyone in the group get their planes set up for auto launch. It's not horribly difficult, but you kind of have to know what you're doing. So here's a guy who is, oh, this is a great video, perfect.
Our all-time favorite, Andrew Newton. So he is doing the shake and throw method. So the plane completely launches by itself. It detects the throw and then powers up the motor and climbs at a specific angle. So you don't have to worry to catch it or to throw it and then quickly grab to your transmitter to catch it before it hits the ground. So it does everything automatically.
Fantastic. There he goes again with it. So he's just, what he does, he turns the throttle on, but it only engages once it gets to a certain, right about there, it engages. And then all of a sudden the plane takes over and it takes off. You can see the trajectory, it's taken off by itself. And a lot of times people, when they first get started with INAV, they're really afraid of launching a plane. And because of that, we're able to do that. They're able to make the transition to INAV even easier. So this kind of, I was mentioning about Larry, you've got a lot of people are like, let's go out, let's fly, why aren't you involved in this? This is so neat, this is so exciting. And I think you're trying to get your head around it still, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. It's I like the way it's still in that kind of experimental where people can kind of pursue different parts of it and take off with it. And it's open source, you said, so about everybody can customize it to how they want it to work, and that really intrigues me. And I'm glad to see that kind of stuff is still going on. It's taking it to a whole new level, and I love it.
Yeah, fabulous. So what happened was Larry joined the group by himself. He's part of the INAV fixed wing group. It's Larry Metchke. And you're doing, I think right now you're doing the lurking around. Back in the day you were flying 72 megahertz, and now we have the radio transmitter itself or something you're getting your head around as far as the quality of them and how they work and how we can, it's hard to understand sometimes. Back in the day when you went to an RC field, you would have a little tag, right?
Right.
If you're on channel 18 at 72 megahertz, no one else on channel 18 could fly on it, right?
Yep, that's right.
So, but someone on channel 19 could fly next to you and wouldn't have a problem.
Right.
Now we have literally thousands of channels and no one really cares. There's a video that they did at Flight Test about, the Flight Fest. What they'll do is they'll get everyone that's there, 300-400 people, and they'll all launch the planes at the same time. And they can all do it because they're all on 72 megahertz or something else using Crossfire. But even so, they're not stepping over each other.
Yeah. That is really great to be able to do that.
So the flight controllers themselves, as far as what you're used to, soldering these things up is not going to be a problem for you. The idea is that there's a little USB port right here on this particular one. Some of them stick up. And what you can do is you can plug it in. I've got the wrong side, of course. All right, plug it in, and with this plugs in like this. This other end plugs into your PC. From there, we use INAV. There's ways to go in there. You can configure it, and you go in there and put all the different variables you want to put in there. You can set up the flight control. You can set it up for, it could be set up for a multi-rotor. It could be set up for a plane. When we get into plane, it could be set up for a fixed wing, a plane like a Delta Wing, or where it has Elevon mixing, or it can be set up for a traditional plane. or it can be set up for a Sky Hunter, which has the elevator in the back. So there's a lot of different ways you can go with that. Also, the transmitter itself, let's see, I got one sitting right over here. And this is kind of let you know how the group, how we got going. We were trying to figure out how INAV worked in the first 6 months. And all of a sudden, this guy from Germany writes to me and he says, you know, I do a lot of support for people, and I notice people are asking the same questions over and over again. I can write a simple common troubleshooting manual because I do this at work all the time. And I said, okay, great. As long as you're doing that, can you also tell us about all the different flight modes? Because it's really confusing for me as well. And so that's how Mark Hoffman got started in the group, starting to figure out, helping explain to people how to get going with this. So, but when it came to the radio system, Mark and I were talking about these radios are capable of doing so much. And what this essentially is another computer. And I'm like, you know, there's not as much to do with this. If you set up everything we need in INAV on this, we could build one model and could do everything. And then Mark and I argued for about a month as to how you'd set up the perfect radio, and then finally put it out to the group. Hey, could someone come along and help us put this together? And Darren said, yeah, I'll do it. And that's how we met up with Darren. So Darren is the master of the, this is open source as well. This hooks up to a PC just like the flight controller does. And this is an open source firmware known as OpenTX. So when you turn it on,
welcome to OpenTX.
What happens is, so it's telling me right away that the plane, that this is ready to go with, when I hook it up to my plane, it's disarmed. So right now the plane, it's not armed. What you have to do is you have to plug your plane in, and it will start looking for GPS signals. And when it gets enough GPS signals, it will let you know it's ready to arm. We can see it on our OSD screen. When you're ready to arm,
Throttle arm.
and this was all Darren's design. So what you got is full manual, which means that this is exactly what you're working with, what you're used to working with. It's just, you have complete control, and it only flies as well as you set the plane up.
So
then you put it.
Larry, if you will come back to RC flying someday and you will get one of these transmitters and you feel some kind of nostalgia, then just put a voice on it that says north, north, west, west the whole time. Darren will help you with this.
No problem at all.
So the different flight modes, the first one, this one's called acro mode, and then that one is kind of like manual, but it has flight stabilization in it. It's the least amount of flight stabilization. Horizon mode has, I think, the most comfortable amount of flight stabilization. So it has quite a bit of flight stabilization. It's not quite as touchy. It limits the bank angles, so it's fairly safe. This angle mode has the most limits on bank angles. So this is what I give to people, especially kids these days. What happens when they're flying and they're controlling the plane and it's not going the way they want it to go, they sit there and they'll pull all over the place. And so this limits the angles that they can go. And because of that, the plane's not going to roll and flip over in the sky and end up doing a tailspin and crashing in the ground. Mark was talking about this earlier, which is
auto-tune.
So what that means is when we get the plane flying, you launch the plane and you get it flying, and we usually have it in acro mode when we do this. And so you're up flying, you get to a good comfortable altitude, and then you just simply turn it over to auto tune. And then, according to Mark, because people get this wrong all the time, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to hammer this plane. You're supposed to make it do flips and turns and do everything. You want to fly as aggressively as you possibly can for like the next 30 seconds. And this is Darren's, it's reminding you that it's on. And what it does is it starts calculating what's going on as far as the PIFs and PIDs. It will start to figure out this is where it should be tuned at, and this is what what looks right to me. You need to do this on a day where it's not quite so windy. With that, oh my gosh, you're about 90% of the way there. If you can do that, if you get your plane set up, trimmed properly, and you can put on auto tune, it's gonna be a brilliant plane. Then we also have,
Auto trim.
so if you didn't quite get the trim exactly right, this will finish the job for you. So it's really kind of amazing. Then we also, you saw in the screen, some of the videos we saw, that they have OSD screens. And you have a choice of 3 different OSD screens here. So you can change them for different aspects of how you fly. Like, for example, the way I like to fly, my first OSD screen is everything before I arm the plane. So I can see all the satellites, I can see all the temperature gauges and all the stuff. And I always know it's there, and I can always flip up to it. Oh, also the name of the craft. But when I'm out flying, I don't want to see that stuff. I want to keep it as clear as possible. I don't want a lot of clutter, and I just want to know how high up I am, where I'm going, how far it is to get back, all the basics. And so with that, if you ever need to get back to it and see if you're running low on satellites, you can flip it up. I'm sorry, to screen 1 but usually I'm in screen 2, and then screen 3 is my audition screen. So I will use that for figuring out if there's features of the OSD I want to add, see how they work. Like one of the latest ones was figuring out the wind speed, and we actually can figure out. It's not exactly accurate, but it gives you a good indication if you're up flying around and it feels like, man, this plane's not flying right. You can flip down, I can look and I can see, oh yeah, there's a lot of wind up there. So that's why it's feeling weird today.
So Larry seems to be a little bit overwhelmed right now with all that stuff we tell him at once.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there.
So
it's really fascinating.
I would really suggest, as you are now part of the group and we know we have our contact details, you think about getting into back in the hobby again, and yeah, of course you will get a lot of help, and we will help you to set it up. And then you can
sounds real good.
Go airborne again.
Yeah.
So you're going to do it at your own speed, right, Larry?
Yeah, I'm really interested in it, and I'm going to be looking into it in the next few weeks. There's so much there that it's just really interesting. I want to really find out how they all work, how do you program them, and what kind of stuff you run into. That's real neat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and then what happens is, for a guy like yourself, a lot of these planes now are made with, we can kind of help you out. One of the most common ones is that plane that we saw flying over Dubai, which is the AR wing, because it's very durable. And if you do crash it, usually it goes back together without a problem, but sometimes you might actually have to glue it back, parts back onto it again. It's very durable, and that's why I think it's one of the favorites of the group. But it flies wonderfully. So that's always a good first one to get into. You have the experience of flying in line of sight. You have the experience of flying FPV. You have the experience of doing all this stuff. So it's the electronics, of course, is not going to be a challenge for you at all. And I think the only thing you might struggle with is just getting the flight controller set up. And that's where Mark and I have, or Mark, I say in particular, can have the expertise. Darren, do I get anything that you wanted to point out as far as your build is concerned?
No, I think you covered all the bases. I mean, in all honesty, I don't actually use it, so you know more about it than I do. But because my Tyrannus is customized,
Right.
So I've got 6 position switches for modes and stuff like that. So that's why I don't use it. I think it's a good system, but it wouldn't work with my switch layout. And I did that before I made the build. So making the build was challenging.
The radio, you can always buy a new one and you have a brilliant build, what you've made yourself, right?
Yeah, definitely. But no, yeah, I think you've covered all the bases. I mean, there's other little hidden things, like it's got a flight timer on it, which isn't so much important for electronics, but it also has INAV has a menu that you can get into from within your goggles. So you can do things like change the power bands of your video transmitter if it's hooked up with like a smart audio protocol or something like that. And there's if you hold there's a momentary switch on the back, and if you hold that in till it beeps, it will go straight into that menu rather than having to remember the stick commands and all that sort of thing.
The OSD screen, right?
Yeah, it goes into the OSD menu. If you hold down, I think it's for about 2 seconds, it does a double beep. If you let go of a switch, then it goes into the OSD menu. But yeah, I think you covered most of it there.
It's really brilliant, and part of it also why it's really great is because you don't need to have, this particular transmitter will hold, I think, 60 different models as far as different planes. You only need one if you can fly with INAV. So you have, let's say, 10 different INAV planes, and you can sit there and bind them over and over again with the same setup and just use one model. And all the planes fly exactly the same. It doesn't matter if you're flying a delta wing where it has elevons, or if you're flying with a traditional one where you have rudder, elevator, and ailerons. It will work with that one model setup, and it's just really a brilliant way to do this. So, Mark, do we have questions?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat right now. Your Sky Hunter plane with the motor on the top, on the back, was it a 3-channel or a 4-channel plane? Does it had a rudder? Or was it just ailerons?
It was a aileron, elevator, and rudder.
Ah, okay. So one guy in the chat was just asking because it seems to look that it has no rudder.
Yeah, that's optical illusion. It had a rudder. I even had to add tips on the tail to add extra rudder. It ended up being too small of a rudder.
Ah, okay, great. So because a lot of planes today we fly, they have often no rudder, so only elevator and ailerons, because usually that's enough to fly. You just fly bank and yank.
Yeah. Most of the time, I never used a rudder myself. So you just bank and then elevator to turn. Yeah.
Because usually you do coordinate turns just on passenger planes or so to make it more comfortable. But on the RC plane, no one cares how the pilot feels inside.
Yeah. That's funny.
Was there another question?
No other question in the chat right now.
Okay, got it. So yeah, there's just to summarize this, that when you get into this, and I'm talking about people who are just coming on to INAV for the first time as well. You get into the chat, get into our group on Facebook, we're INAV Fixed Wing Group. What you'll find is that just lurk around. We got plenty of people who just come to the group, they lurk around, and they start seeing stuff and start doing things, and they find things of interest to them, and they're people. And I think everyone's really approachable, and that's the thing that's neat about the group. But I can tell you from personal experience, when I got first started in INAV, I would get stuck, and I knew nobody, and there was no one to help me. And this was like 2 years ago, and I would get stuck in a problem, and I would have to sit down and go look through all the YouTube videos, go Google as many different combinations of words as possible until I finally found the answer. And so you often find yourself stuck on a problem for 2 weeks at a time. I think Larry could probably identify with that, where you're by yourself and you're stuck and you don't have support, right?
Yeah, you have to dig in and figure it out yourself. That's what at least that's what I had to do.
Right. But now it's literally a perfect example. I had one of the first, series of successful flights at INAV. I would keep bringing my plane home in pieces. It would just crash, and it was always the same issue, which was it's flying level, but it's still losing altitude. So I got in the group and I explained my problem. Hey, my plane's flying level, but it's losing altitude. And James Mills writes back, and he has a nice paragraph, and he explains, you got to put pitch in your plane. Even though it's flying level, it will lose altitude. You have to put a little bit of up pitch in it. And so you tell me where to put it at. And from that point on, that problem was done. And that's kind of what the group's about. If you can ask a question in the right way, and the right way means that we have enough information so that we don't have to dig it out, because what will happen if you ask a question and we don't get enough information from you and we have to start asking questions, the guy who could probably answer the question is probably looking over the group on Facebook during his lunch break, and he's not going to go to 8 levels down to figure out what your issue is. If you didn't ask about it in the first place, he might not be able to answer it. So if you can ask the question, give us enough information, we're finding that a lot of the times you should be able to get an answer within a day to your issue. If something is getting you stuck, and we've had people who are absolutely lost as far as I can't get this to work. And we can usually, and especially Mark Hoffman, who will personally take his time and he'll work with people over and over again to make sure, like, if it's a real technical issue, he'll make sure that happens. We also have, the community is also more than just the INAV fixed wing group. We have a lot of other great groups out there. We had one group in particular that was a guy from England who was really a jovial, fun guy who had a lot of passion for the hobby, who just one day up and quit, and he had his own group going with a lot of different members, and the people, we closed down his Facebook group. All of a sudden these guys had nowhere to go. So Darren stepped in and created his own group with these members, and so you have the Fixed Wing Rebel group, right, Darren?
Yeah. Yeah, so basically, I don't know whether to mention the name of the group or not, just because it's his own thing, and if he goes back to it, then brilliant.
Right. Just for others to know.
Yeah, so basically everyone was saying, oh, it's a shame the group's closing down. Why do you have to close it? Why didn't someone else make a new group? And no one was making a new group, so I thought I'll just do it. It's just jump in and do it. So that's what I did. So we now have this group.
Fixed Wing Rebels.
Fixed Wing RC Rebels. Where I'm trying to keep it like a similar thing to the INAV group, where everyone helps out each other. It's just a nice place to be. Everyone's welcome, and just enjoying the fun of the hobby. It's just the only limitation is fixed wing. That's it. Whatever it is, turbines, gliders, FPV, scale, absolutely anything like that is absolutely fine. And we welcome everyone. And obviously, if they have INAV issues, we can help them in this group. But I'll also point them to the INAV group if they're not already a member as well. So yes, it's
fantastic. That's great. Every single plane, all these different plane models we talk about, you can buy in advance. Buy commercially, like the Air Wing and the Sky Hunter, and there was the big, still the big slurs, and all these things from Hobby King. They had the Bonsai, and they had the Texumos and all this stuff. They all have their own little groups on Facebook as well. Also for the transmitters as well, FR Sky has its own group. So there's just a lot of different places you can go, and that's just like, you are never really stuck if you can really ask the questions. In the INAV Fixed Wing group, we have people we're at about 2,800 members right now. We have people literally from every continent in the world. So, I mean, places that are, one thing that we emphasize heavily is that, when we look at the map, I'm like, I remember going to war with that country. I remember us being mad at that country and whatever else. And there are people that have different religions. We have all the religions covered, all the politics covered, and everything else. And none of that's allowed. We're not allowed to discuss religions and politics and whatever else. All we care about is the passion of RC flying with INAV. And that's how we stay focused on it. So I think, there was a time about a year or two ago that before the group started, I was just really tired of going on Facebook and seeing the same political posts every single day from the same people saying the same garbage. And what I thought was really cool about this group is that it was really refreshing, where none of this is allowed, and we're just talking about the things we love, and that is what we're about. So I think that's the most important thing. What would be really different for you this time, Larry, is that this time around you have a group that's behind you, and we are personally invested in you. If you decide to do this and keep going with this, you will have a wonderful experience. You'll be up and flying much faster than you were in the past, and I think enjoying it a hell of a lot more. We have a question.
No question. I just want to inform you that we are now 2 hours in. So
okay,
as a little reminder.
We're 2 hours in, and I think this is kind of like a good stopping point. Is anything else you'd like to cover, guys? No. Mark's shaking his head, and Darren's shaking his head. So, all right. So, Larry, You are the guy, and I really want to thank you because this was, first of all, for what you've done for the community as far as being the first to do this and to share your experiences with us and give us, hope and inspiration from the past. What we definitely needed at the time is what you gave us.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that it did that at a good time for you. Hats off to Mark and Darren and all of you guys that are working on that. It really took me by surprise to how much all the stuff you have available now and that you can play with it. That's really exciting. And thanks for inviting me to come on here.
Great.
I hope it's been a good video for people. But
I think, yeah, people just are really curious about you. And I think also you just have this nature about you, which is kind of like really honest and to the point. And, people want to know more about you. So thank you. I know this was when I first approached you about this, it was like, I don't know, this is for me. And I said, you need a victory lap, and this is it. And I hope this was that experience you had today. Like you feel like, yeah, I really did something back then, and people appreciate it.
Yeah, and I also want to mention a few things from the chat. The people are absolutely amazed about what you did back then. One guy said you are the father of FPV. You're a great inspiration. So yeah, they really liked what you did back then.
Yeah, definitely a pioneer of the hobby.
I really appreciate all those comments on my video. Yeah, there was a lot of those. I really appreciate that.
That's great. I'm glad you've got the recognition you deserve. And there are a lot of people back then. I mean, and our hobby is, as we go along, there's like when Darren and I were working, when Mark, Darren and I were working on the transmitter, OpenTX transmitter model that he's developing. There at one point we had to go back to a video that was by it was a KC. So we've had a couple pioneers, people who helped out, who did really great videos explaining how to get stuff done. And, and that's the neat thing. Andrew Newton is a guy like that, where if you want to know anything about a plane, he'll put it together. He'll explain how the plane goes together and he'll let you know how it works. But there were a couple guys that unfortunately didn't make it the journey, and they both died in motorcycle crashes. Sam was one of them, and it was a KC.
Project Blue Falcon. I can never remember his actual name, but yeah.
I thought it was Jamie.
JC maybe.
JC, yeah.
Yeah.
JC, yeah. So, we didn't have a chance really to thank them, but it's kind of like the hobby is built on other people's experiences. And so that's why the group's about, is making sure that people can share their experiences and their victories. And we get excited from the guys who can fly 40 miles out, but we also get really excited about the guys who buy their first AR wing or whatever they're flying. And, when they ask a million questions, and sometimes like, I'm so sorry, I have another question to ask. And then they'll show a video, this is my maiden flight. And then 3 months later, they're on to the 5th INAV plane and they can't get enough of it. And that's what we love to see as well. So that's kind of, it's a really great feeling. So, and you're the guy, the first to do it in the United States to really, at least that we know of, to make this happen. And you got the view of the world. So once again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Great.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to Mark Hoffman for engineering this, Darren for being with us today, and the groups. We should also thank groups that allow us to link to this. Is Beers Bro and FPV, Darren's group, Fixed Wing RC Rebels, and we do these videos infrequently. We've done 2 in a row, so we'll do another one, and next time we get it together and get some ideas as to what we'd like to do next. So about once a month is what we're going to be doing. This is just us sharing the passion of the hobby, and that's all it's about. So thanks for watching.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Larry.
Thanks.
Keep them flying.
Okay, we're offline.
We're out. All right.
So, yeah. Whew.
So how was it?
Yeah, it was great. good number of visitors, of watchers. About 24 was the maximum. Yeah, 24 was the maximum. And most of the time we were about between 20 and 25 roundabout.
Okay.
People who watched and also asked questions.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's going to happen is as the video goes up, more people will watch it and they want to know more about you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely.
It's usually afterwards, isn't it? You get lots more hits on it.
Sure.
Yeah. So they can find out more about it. So, well, great. It was a lot. I know it was a lot of work to put this together. I appreciate all the time you put into it.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you guys enough. There's been so many hits on the video. It's just really overwhelming, and this has really been kind of tense the past few days. And so thanks for making it easy for me.
I know it's not natural to sit in front of a webcam and talk and stuff like that. And we have a little bit more experience with it, we have a rapport with each other and stuff like that. And so I'm glad. I know it's really, you did fantastic. I think people are really going to like hearing more about what you were up to.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, I'm ready to go have a beer and relax.
Yeah.
So
yeah, thank you, Larry.
Okay.
Thanks,
awesome.
Larry.
Larry, have a great evening.
Sign off.
Oh, great!
Kinda what?
Have a great day where you are.
Yeah, you too. Auf Wiedersehen. We'll talk to you later.
Bye bye.
See ya.
Bye bye.
Okay.
Yeah. So went well. It was. I was a little bit struggling at the end when we were searching some YouTube videos, but it was pretty funny during the call. Sometimes when you switch the topics, I know in the agenda you linked me some parts of his video I should show freeze frames. That worked well, and later while he was talking about his 3-mile flight and his antenna tracker and all that stuff, at least I was able to quickly skip to the point and find the part of the video. So I just switched into screen sharing while you were talking about that stuff. It was pretty nice. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it looks. I was going to tease you about the fighter pilot thing, but it was just kind of like I think we hit all the key points, and the most important thing was like this is a guy that he did. You can tell it was really difficult for him to do this. He's not really great. His answers were pretty short, and he was kind of always a bit nervous. But this was